And if you just acknowledge that, that would be wonderful. Okay, folks, here we go. Like I mentioned before, we're going to do this every couple of weeks. And Kyle, who is in this, will be running this kind of moving forward. We're going to be very basic, just going to be looking at the kind of just the initial stuff, just to kind of make you feel comfortable to build on. So I kind of like to say it's crawl before walk and walk before run. And that's what we're going to attempt to do. I'm going to share my screen on my main computer here. And this will be screen one. And from there, we're gonna be super basic on it. Now, my screen is gonna look slightly a little different than everybody else's, but just slightly. I mean, the things we're gonna do are there. I am an accountant user, so I do have a little slightly bit of different in the interface, right? You'll see accountant and accountant tools. These aren't gonna show up. There is a few different settings that you can set up, from the accountant view versus the other side. So I'm not going to get into the viewing aspect because really what you do inside the system is the same, whether it's an accountant user or not. There's just a few functional tools that we have. Really, the big one is kind of reclassifying transactions in bulk. We can do some of those things. But what I really want to kind of start with is, just being comfortable enough to get into getting into QuickBooks Online. If you haven't had a bookmark or anything like that. So I don't actually, I've got some bookmark things going on, but a lot of times I just tell people just to quickly drop a QBO in your, if you're using Chrome, you drop it in, it's going to come up as sign in at the very top. And then once you sign in, you'll see the sign in area, QuickBooks Online, upper right corner, pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Once I do sign in there, if you do have things saved, right? For me, I'm already logged in. So it obviously is going to come in. But if I wasn't necessarily logged in, it would ask for my username and password at that point. So we're going to do it again now that I should be. I'm going to see if I can log out so you can just actually see the whole piece. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and log out of this guy. So you can see, so this is the actual login area, right? It saves me because I just checked that little box to save my information. I even have my system silly enough to remember my passwords. I do use my passwords when I'm at work. Obviously, people will say, don't do that. I do it for QuickBooks, obviously. It makes life a little bit easier. You will not see this next screen, when you come in here, because this, again, is the accounting interface. You will jump right to your client file that you have access to. This will be our dummy file today that we will work within. Okay. So what I want to kind of focus in on is going to be some of the things that you can do. You can invite people to this, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that inviting. Up here, this cog and the upper right corner is kind of the preferences. And this is kind of the, I guess, the meat and potatoes, the engine behind things, right? You can see accountant settings, manage users. This is where when you do go to manage users as an administrator, you'll have two areas, right? Users and accountants. The nice part is an accountant user is different than a user. A user is really ownership. You can have multiple users. You can have a staff person go, I only want that staff person to see this while I still maintain administrative access to all things. So when you do want to set up a user, right, there'll be a little green button here. This is just a single user dummy file. So I don't have the ability to add more users to this one, but there is a little green button in here that says add a user name, first name, last name, email. They get an email link. They accept it. At that point, they're now added to this list from that. Same thing with accountants, right? The little green button. Again, this is a dummy file. I only have one, but little green button says add an accountant, right? And for us, you don't have to actually ever really do that because we'll most likely be in here in the first place. So that's kind of the first part, is just adding users. Pretty easy to do. There's some other things in the accountant in the settings area. For some people, they're going to be on a more advanced. You can see there's things like, hey, I want to add payments. This is a unique feature where you can set up to take credit cards if you want to invoice. For this purpose today, I'm not going to actually get into it, but just know that it is there. They do charge 3%, on the merchant service side of things. So just keep track of that. You might get better deals elsewhere if you don't use QuickBooks invoicing. So Really no reason to do this unless you're going to actually invoice, excuse me, out of QuickBooks. Other things in the advanced area, right? Class tracking. Again, class tracking is available on certain levels. How QuickBooks does this is they monetize to various degrees the subscription. My thing, and when I set people up inside this, is I often look at what's the least expensive, most effective version to use, right? A lot of people come in and they're like, give me the big one. Well, you're kind of blowing money, wasting money, because they do monetize this thing on a month-by-month basis. And so we try to just keep it at a very expensive one. That's why if I'm on the lowest version, I don't actually have class tracking. Class tracking, what it is basically it's an extra field. Specifically, let's say if you owned a retail outlet and you've had multiple locations, you could actually say it was location A, location B as you're recording revenues and expenses, and you can actually see the profit centers as it go. I do use class tracking as an accountant. My classes are my people. And so that's kind of an important little feature, from a class tracking standpoint. You can class track anything. You just be consistent on it. But again, it's exponential in work because yet it's another field. You could get one bill for something, you pay the bill and you have to break it up. Well, it just adds more work to that. So if you don't need it, I don't worry about it. Not going to talk a lot about class tracking today. I'm going to try to keep it to the basics, just kind of showing the setting area here to just kind of snoop around. It's not a bad way to take a look. But you can't really mess a lot of stuff up unless you just say cancel subscriptions, which actually can be done. But from there, just some informational stuff. But you can take a peek in there if you find it. We're going to head on back to the overview. Again, links on your left-hand side here that I see. You might have a little bit of difference, from the links that I use versus yours. But for all intents and purposes, once we get to the meat and potatoes, it will be the same. Okay. So big picture goal today, bank accounts, recording transactions, importing transactions, connecting a bank. That's an important feature because one of the biggest things and the values that I see with inside of QuickBooks Online is your ability to sync your bank account. And what it does is it takes the transactions from the bank, and I call it purgatory, QuickBooks Purgatory. It actually sends it to this separate account to be dealt with prior to it actually hitting your register. So a lot of people I see that make mistakes in this is that they'll actually download a bunch of transactions thinking it's good, but it actually never hits the register because they haven't physically shifted it out of purgatory. And the reason why they create that little middleman / purgatory area is so that you can really look for duplication, because some individuals might go, hey, I would like to write a check out of QuickBooks, put a check in the printer and go. Well, if you start to do that and you're downloading transactions from the bank's going to give you everything. All right. They're not going to go just send me this. They give you everything, which means it will also give you checks that might be on the register if you wrote checks out of QuickBooks. So it's important to utilize that purgatory, and they do a nice job. They've got some AI functionality in here to help prevent duplication. I would say duplication is the number one error inside of QuickBooks. If I was to see anything on an ongoing basis that causes more problems for people, it's the duplication fact, where they're importing things, they might be doing things, and it's causing duplication. It's causing their bank accounts to be off. It's causing reconciliations to be more problematic than they should be. And so we'll take a look at that and show some of those things that are taking place in there as well. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to look at is like the banking activity, and some of the activity that's in here. This is such a dumbed down version here. I'm actually going to go a different spot. I'm going to use mine. They've actually changed some of the banking areas in here. So I'm going to go straight to banking. Some of these books are going to be a little bit different, but this is actually mine. It's the firm's. And so from a banking perspective, what you'll see inside of ours is that I've got linked accounts here. I've got credit cards, right? Capital One Visa. This is a card that just carries 0. The main checkbook is linked, right? And then this is what's going to actually lead to the linking. So when I come into a clean account and there isn't any accounts here to start with, the first step is we actually have to link an account. Okay. And so one of the things that I will do is I'm going to show you that process, right? So when it's clean and you want to link account, obviously you need to have your username and password for the bank. And the bank kind of needs to be a little advanced. It can't be the teeny tiniest credit union in nowhere. They might not have the technology to work with this, but any of the major ones, and probably 95% of all banks and credit cards will allow for syncing in that place. But the first step here is to physically link an account. What's going to come up is they're going to give you kind of the big main ones. Okay. And then from here, if let's say you're banking at Wells Fargo, right? If I'm at Wells Fargo, bang, it's going to come up with Wells Fargo. From here, what you're going to do is when I do hit continue, it's going to open up a little browser and it's going to bring me to the Wells Fargo site to physically log in, right? From here, once I log in, if I have multiple bank accounts, you have to be kind of cautious, right? So keep in mind, what is QuickBooks for? QuickBooks is for business banking. It is not a commingling experience of let's put our personal stuff in here with our business stuff. You just killed the data and you just killed your financials. So remember, when I go through this and I do this, it's going to give me a list of every account. I've got like 7 or 8 accounts at Wells Fargo. And so I have to go, yep, I want that one, right? And then after I select that specific bank, the next thing it's going to ask me is 2 pieces of information that's super important. It's going to say, what account on the chart of accounts do we want to link this to? And I'm going to talk about the chart of accounts. And then secondly, it's going to say, when do I want to start this download? And that's kind of important too, right? If I got somebody that's fresh and new coming into my office, I might try to download all their transactions from January 1st. If I've got somebody that's been dead keying things on desktop and they're all fully reconciled through August, I do not want to go back to January 1st because we might have that duplication. And so be mindful of what's in the file before you select it. Once you do it the first time, you're done. You're never going to have to answer that question again because it knows from there to just grab the new stuff. So it's, again, the first time you're going to link it to the chart of account, which is a great segue, chart of accounts. So from here, our chart of accounts, a lot of different ways to get there, mainly from the dashboard area or the overview area. This looks very familiar to people because this is what shows up in desktop. Oh, they're going to try to sell me something. No, thank you. There we go. And once I have that piece there, you can see this looks familiar to desktop for people that are used to using desktop. And we have a few different kind of links, if money in, money out. They kind of try to make it friendly, in that purpose. There are multiple places to get to certain stuff and chart of accounts. We can always use this little guy, this little magnifying glass, right? I can type some things in here that's going to help us. And I'm going to show you how this works, pretty robustly. At the same time, I, a lot of times, like to go through my lists through the cog, right? I use this a lot. Again, multiple ways to do the same thing. You kind of pick your poison, choose what you like. I like to see my lists and I can see all the different lists I have. Oh, there's my chart of accounts, right? And so when chart of accounts come up, from here, you can see, right, chart of accounts. I do have numbers on things all the way down to when we get into revenues, into cost of goods sold, so on and so forth. Next area. But let's talk a little bit about chart of accounts. I think it's important. I think it's really important for people to understand the backbone of this. You'll see here, like the Wells Fargo, right? QuickBooks balance, bank balance, and notice this little arrow left and right. That tells you this is the one that's linked into the banking area to really help you find the stuff that needs. So when you do this, when you do that first syncing, this is what I meant by saying you need to select this on the chart of accounts. If I select this, like Schwab, well, that's going to be obviously putting the banking transactions in the wrong account, and it's going to cause problems for a reconciliation. Things can be undone, but I prefer to be wise under the first step and not make any mistakes from there. But let's talk a little bit about the backbone, which is the chart of accounts. This is the secret to all of accounting. It's the first thing they started with in accounting class, is talking about chart of accounts. understanding that they are typically broken up in categories, right? So I'm going to look at it from, I won't print it. That's fine. I'll use this. From this standpoint, the very first chart of account areas that should come up should be your assets for your company. Assets, things that are of value, checking accounts, accounts receivable, fixed assets, desks, computers, maybe it's real estate. All right, I should be back now. Can you hear me up there? Okay, good. So always fun with technology. So this screen that is monitoring my voice is actually on Wi-Fi, not on wired like the rest of the stuff. But it looks good. So back to this little template on assets where I left off, right? Assets are going to be all the things of worth, right? We typically will use the 1,000 series. If you see numbers on chart of accounts, like if we built it, we're going to use the 1,000 series. It's kind of the method to our madness. The 2,000 series are going to be all of your liabilities being debt, right? Credit cards, long-term loans, whatever could be there. Could be real estate related loans, could be the credit card, could be a line of credit, could be whatever you want. And then we get into our equity accounts, which typically we number them to the 3,000 series. And the 3,000 series is really what's left over and what's remaining after everything is said and done. Then we get into our 4,000 series. 4,000 series being income, right? That's what we typically call our income series, which leads us into our 5,000 series, which is our cost of goods sold. So when we deal with cost of goods sold, what is that? What is the definition of cost of goods sold? That's going to be expenses that are directly correlated to revenues, meaning like in my office, we do have basically commissions that are paid and certain things that are based on production, like you have in most, professional services. And so those to me are my cost of goods, because as revenues rise, so too does that expense. There's a correlation there. That's the definition of a cost of good. It's not rent, right? Rent's an overhead item, and that gets us to our final categories. For us, it's the 6,000 and later. And these are the things that are going to be like just regular overhead related items, from vehicle repairs to meals to entertainment. You notice it's segregated now. Meals and entertainment are different in the tax law since 2018. So that's just a little side there. But the gist is overhead related expenses are those expenses that are going to be there whether or not your business is successful, right? So those are the things to think about, and why it's important, not just from a big picture standpoint of segregating cost of goods, as well as those G&A expenses. It's so you can really kind of see how your business is performing on a margin level, as well as you can do break-even analysis, meaning how many sales do I need at this margin level to cover all of my overhead on a month-by-month basis. It's a really easy metric when you have a good chart of accounts set up, and we'll get into that when we get into the reporting. Let's say I don't like something, right? Let's say I'm looking at a dummy chart of accounts, and I'm like, I really need to add some cost of goods sold. I need to change something, right? I have a dummy thing here called cost of goods sold. I don't like it. There's no number on it, something like that. Well, from here, I can just over on this side, I can edit it, right? Drop down arrow, edit it. And I can change the name of this thing, right? So maybe I want to just call this, I don't know, miscellaneous other COGS. Keep it in that cost of goods sold. And maybe I want to put a number on it. This one is unique because I actually put numbers in my words and not actually numbers activated. So you can do two things, right? I put numbers in my words instead versus having numbers activated where there'd be like another field up here for a number. It's just because of the way mine was imported, it came in that way. I wasn't going to reinvent the wheel and do it. But once you see that, right, now you can see my other miscellaneous COGS here for cost of goods sold has been done, right? I want to add something new, right? If I want to add something new here at the very top, you can see the lovely green button. QuickBooks loves to use green for new things. They love to use green to point your eyes to things to do. And so from here, I can go new, and then I can figure out, well, what am I looking to do? Most people don't really touch assets, credit cards, liabilities too often, right? Or equity specifically, almost never. They're mainly looking at adding these two, right? Income and expenses. When you think about a business owner, what do they look at most of the time? Income and expenses, right? That's the P&L seems to be the most important. To us accountants, we're actually staring at these more than we are at these because this is where we find the errors. This is where owners tend to focus. So, but if you need to add one, right? I need to add an expense. I forgot I didn't have an expense for, let's see, what would be one that I might like? Maybe I want to break something up, right? Maybe I got travel and lodging here, 7,700. And then maybe I want to pick, maybe I just want to pick an expense and I want to break it up. I want hotels. I do a lot of traveling. I really kind of want to see the hotel side of things. I can add this, right, to hotels. You can see how it's going to pop in right below the travel and lodging. And then maybe I change the name of this guy and remove the lodging piece. You're in control. You can do whatever you want. This is a total managerial decision. I just want to show you how, right, to do that from the chart of accounts standpoint. So again, remember assets, liabilities, equity, that's going to be your balance sheet item. And then when we get into the income statement, that's going to be further down, right? Income, cost of goods sold and expenses. And I think QuickBooks does this organically, even without the numbering system. The thing I like about numbers is that it a lot of times will put it in that chronological order. So it gives you that kind of that memory. And as I do a lot of accounting, I know what certain numbers are, and it makes it easier if you're a 10 key fiend like myself. Okay. So once you've got kind of that chart of accounts in your mind squared away, and we're heading into that banking, I kind of talked a little bit about before syncing, and we're syncing our accounts to our bank accounts. Then when things start to come in, right, I'm all caught up to date. You see all these green checks, all caught up. So it might be a bad example for this because most people will come in, they'll download, and there's going to be a ton of expenses in here. I'm going to come in and let me update this. So I update what it's doing right now. You can see everything spinning. If I don't see it spin, or I see a hazard sign or a stop sign or something that's going to show a disconnect, that's going to tell me that, oh, it's struggling to go get new information. And so you can see the one that's taking the longest time is the Wells Fargo. And then the Capital One Visa came in. So let's take a look. You'll notice I do this for myself 3 times a week. It takes me 15 minutes a week, and I can keep a pretty transaction heavy business under control because everybody knows that they can code 1 or 2 expenses at a time. I do not personally, I do not write checks out of QuickBooks. I do not invoice. I have a different invoicing system. I try to keep things segregated, even though I could do it and I'm fully trained and I know how to use it. I've just learned that I'm better and I have more accurate financial data when I use other systems to handle other things, right? I don't do accounts payable. I just pay bills. And when I do pay the bill, I don't actually put it in the system. I wait for the bank to tell me what it is, and then I code it. It's just, for me, it's easier, it's faster, it's a quicker thing. But let's take a look at the Visa. So I've got, this is a great example, right? S. Bloomington, uncategorized. So right now it's trying to use AI a little bit, and it says uncategorized. It means it doesn't know what this is, right? And so a lot of times I'll open this up. Oh, there it is. I remember what this was. I took a client to eat at Kincaid's for lunch the other day. And so it doesn't know based on this. Now, if it probably said Kincaid's and it came through, then it would have probably gone, well, that's a meal, right? So what I'm going to do here is a few things, okay? So what I did is I'm not just going to click add. Again, that's going to take it out of this purgatory account. Everything here is not on my register. It is not updated my bank balance inside of QuickBooks, the accurate reports that I'm looking at. And I'm not going to just take this as uncategorized expense. I'm going to fix it before I add it. So clicking on it is going to allow me to do that. And then from here, I could put my payee. Why the payee would matter a lot is 1099 reporting, right? Let's say I've got to pay Billy to do some repair work on a property. Well, I'm probably going to put Billy in here to keep as a vendor so that I know that I can issue a 1099 at the end of the year. But when it comes to Kincaid's and meals, I don't care. I'm not going to set up Kincaid's as a vendor. That doesn't do me any good except cost me more time. And I'm interested in spending 15 minutes, not hours doing this kind of stuff. So, but I do need to fix this. Meals, right? Now, meals, a meal under the new tax law. So many people were taught years ago that if I provide food inside the office, it's different than if I go have lunch with a client. It does not matter anymore. Meals, a meal. Whether you're traveling and you eat, meals, a meal. Okay. So you only need one meal account. I do still see people with multiple meal accounts. It's fine on a managerial side, but you only need one. Okay. Here's that class tracking that I was mentioning. Like I said, I do use class tracking. And I have my classes. My classes are my people, right? So I have basically all the production staff in here, and that's what I use. But again, I could use people. I could use whatever my metric is. And that's just going to help me with some of the reporting side of things to see how things shake up. I am not in here as a class because it's the majority of me, and I prefer me, as if I'm doing the spending, to not actually have a class, right? It speeds me up versus having to type my name the majority of the time. So I only class everybody else, okay? From here, the memo is fine. It pulled this through the AI, pulled this from the download. That's great, that's fine. I never use tags, never. I just never do it. I don't need it, it's not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do anything there with regards to that. Now, here's what's kind of interesting. Let's say I go to Kincaid's a lot, and I wish I did because it's a lovely place, but I have eaten there maybe once in the last 2 years. But let's say I'm like, hey, I'm going to see Kincaid's a lot. I'm going to create a rule for this. What this is going to do is this is going to speed me up even more. And what the rule is going to do is going to say, hey, every time I see this in this particular way, automatically code it, or at least apply the rule for me to just quickly check the box and hit add, right? And I don't have to actually come into this. I do a lot of rules. I'm a rule monger, right? Because as I get busy in the tax season, this is not two. This is a lot more than two. And the rules come in handy. And let me show you how to make a rule, right? So from here, I create a rule. I just name it. I could call this the Kincaid's rule. I don't know. I'll just call it Kincaid's, okay? This applies to transactions out of specifically the Capital One Visa. I don't really do this. I kind of always go all. And the reason why I do all is because what happens if I just use a debit card, right? And it was tied into this account? It wouldn't apply the rule because it only knows the rule to go against that Visa account. So again, I like to do that because it tends to follow the same thing. This is where the AI comes into play. This is the most important field in the rule. Without this, it doesn't know how to do what it wants to do. Okay. So when I do apply the rule, this is the rule that comes into play based upon what is actually being downloaded from the bank. Notice this doesn't say Kincaid's, right? So it didn't really know what to have happen. I probably wouldn't create a rule because I just don't like this S Bloomington thing. But that is the way it downloads, right? But it did know it was Kincaid's when I clicked on it. So I could leave it like that. This does have to have words that are tied to the download, not to what you know it is. Because what you'll find is that the actual download of the corporate name is different than what you will think it is. I see it all the time where I'll get a weird download and I'm like, what is that? And then I finally look it up and I'm like, oh, I didn't know. Also, you'll see some downloads, like you go to Bobby and Steve's for gasoline, and every time you get a new download, it'll say Bobby and Steve's with a number behind it. I got to be very cautious to not put that number in this rule, or it isn't going to do it. In that circumstance, I would just put Bobby and Steve's, but it has to be exactly how it is. I could also just put Bobby, but that's going to get all the Bobbies. Okay. So be careful with what you put into that field. It has to be perfect for that text. And then this is and then we tell it where we want it to go, right? It's a meal, it's an expense. It's going to remember it based on what I did over here. And then this is kind of an important part. I don't like auto add. Auto add means you're not even going to see it on the list. It's just going to go, right? And I'm kind of a micromanager where I like to see it on the list and it'll show up green and it'll say rule, right? You'll see this thing that says rule. If I did hit save, I'm not going to, but this would change to green and it's going to go rule next to it. And then I can simply just click on add, or if I'm doing all of them, I can go bang and accept them all. If I have a big laundry list of rules, that makes this go fast. And that's kind of it, right? So when I'm done with this thing and I like it, I got my meals, got my Kincaid's, whatever, no class, I can hit my green button. I'm going to add it up, all set with that account. Notice if I went and logged into Capital One Visa, my bank balance matches my QuickBooks data. It better. I downloaded it. I don't enter dead key things into it. This better be equal. If it's not equal and I have a green check, I've got a problem, right? And I've got to figure out what that problem is. So then we look at this, and here we go. Here's a match. This is a good example of something that I do. And what this is somebody paid for something, probably a tax return, because we're at that tax deadline now. What ends up happening is, as for me, I record deposits by hitting this new button. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but I'll record a bank deposit before it's actually cleared my bank. And it kind of lets me know on an accounts receivable standpoint what's happened. Now I know it's going to come through, but it hasn't been downloaded yet. This is a perfect example of that minimization of duplication. The system sees that, hey, you already put this on the register. We see this deposit that you put in for Vanco for 1533. Are you sure, right? It doesn't even let me add it. It immediately goes to match. Well, it knows. Do not duplicate this deposit on my register, please, right? I just simply click match and yep, it's gone. It matches. Here's another one. This one doesn't know what it is, right? I'm going to create a rule on this one because this does happen to be the same pretty much every time. This is Medicom. This is health insurance. So I'm going to put my code in here, my 67 for the employee medical insurance. I'm not going to classify it. Doesn't really matter for me. And then my Medica. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a rule on this. I'm going to call this Medica, and it's going to apply to all my accounts, right? And this is that important piece, right? See, it's got all these crazy numbers in. I don't really want all that because it's going to only catch super specific stuff. So I'm going to kind of clean this up, and I'll give you a great example. I'm going to take this away. I'm going to take this away. I'm going to take this away. And I want to keep, I'm going to keep that, right? Medica EDI. I know it's going to show up. So anything with Medica EDI, I'm not going to go just generic with Medica because I just never know. But if I see this Medica EDI payment and it just sees Medica EDI, right? It's going to automatically create the rule for me. It's going to categorize it for me. I hit save, right? And now you can see rule 6710. It now knows to create the rule. And when I start to see lots and lots of rules here as I import, congratulations. I just check the bulk box here and I accept them all. And that's it. That's the secret sauce. Now, why is mine different? Because I mentioned over here, right? Uh-oh, we have a problem. Well, for me, it's because I put deposits in, like I mentioned, prior to, I don't put expenses in, but I will put deposits in by physically going new, make deposit. Now, again, you don't have to. You can wait. I could wait until they clear the bank, but then I'll never get a match. I would just categorize those deposits most likely to revenue. I just do it because it's just anal accountant in me that I just match those things up, mainly for a timing reporting issue, class tracking. There's a lot of reasons for me in-house, but that's really the game. Okay. Once I'm done, what's kind of cool is, like, if I'm on my Visa, we got this link here that says go to bank register. This is going to look a lot like QuickBooks Desktop. When I click on this register, this looks like the old 1980 checkbook register, right? And from here, you can see all these C's, right? Meaning that it's cleared the account. That's what the C means. It's cleared. If I hold my mouse and hover it, right? You see it says cleared, tentatively reconciled, okay? And not reconciled, but tentatively reconciled. And then from there, I can go ahead and physically complete the reconciliation. I know it actually will reconcile because in that previous banking area over here, it was just showed me, hey, what the bank says, what you owe on your credit card is truly what we show that you owe on your credit card on the books. Okay. So let me show you how to do the bank reconciliation. Sometimes there are varying differences, varying degrees of things. Okay. First thing that you would do when you would reconcile your bank account is on your other screen, if it's a multi-monitor, or you pull it up, just get your PDF of your bank statement, or online banking is fine. You can reconcile to the day. You don't have to wait for your statement at the end of the month. Online banking is great, right? So basically, you'll write down when you're looking at your online banking or your statement, you write down what the bank says you have. Okay. Write down the date that the bank says you have what you have. Okay. And then from here, from my register, I'm going to hit my reconcile button. Again, there are more ways to get to reconciliation, by the way. There are a lot of ways to do the exact same thing. I'm going to reconcile my Capital One Visa. You'll see that my last time that I actually reconciled this thing was back on August 20th, 2023, because I'm kind of always reconciling it. It's not that big of a deal for me. But for some people, I tell them, hey, reconcile it, right? It helps you find errors. I'm just doing it so meticulously through the banking area that I'm almost always balanced all the time. So for this purpose, my ending balance 600,210, my ending date 10/12/2023. Okay. And then from here, I'm going to start to reconcile. It's now going to bring up all of the transactions that I've not theoretically cleared through the reconciliation system, right? I know they're all there. And what I love about this is, because I knew I already kind of was reconciled, is that I am perfect. Everything clears. I have not a single outstanding. Now, a lot of times when you come in and you don't use online banking, you'll actually have to physically come through and go and looking at your statement going, oh, that one cleared. That one cleared. And you can see that's a pain in the rear, right? To do something like that. Utilize the bank sync. It's going to make your life extremely easy, because I got to get this difference to zero in my reconciliation function or I'm not done, right? I just happen to know that it matches perfectly. Yes, I do want to select them all. That's asking me in case I was meticulous. You would hate to do that by mistake and lose where you were. So I'm glad they give you that little warning. And then once I see that this difference is zero, congratulations. Finish now. You've reconciled this account. Because it's a credit card, it's now going, you want to pay it? Right? And the answer is no. For me, it's auto pay or electronic pay. So I do not need to like physically write a check. A little old school mentality here, where it's entering, like you can enter a bill now to pay it, because it knows that it's a liability. So it's kind of sometimes too smart. I don't do any of that. I'm done, right? Brings me back to my reconciliation. Now look at that last statement date, 10/12/23, beginning balance. So if I get my statement at the end of October and I want to do it again, okay, I'll put the ending balance. I'll put the ending date. Dunsky, right? Super easy from a reconciliation standpoint. Okay. So we've talked about logging in. We've talked about the backbone to the chart of accounts. We've talked about syncing our banks up or our credit cards up in the banking. Probably the greatest thing the QuickBooks Online has done. The ability to use this on any computer. You don't have to have some sort of a remote desktop application. It's absolutely lovely to utilize the syncing functionality. And then we talked about the chart of accounts, making sure you're coding things to the right chart of accounts. Typically, you're going to be using the expense area and the cost of goods, probably 95% of the time as you code, right? Things that pull up down here, a lot of times are not balance sheet items unless I bought a desk or something that was going to last me a length of time. We talked about reconciling a little bit towards the class tracking functionality. And reconciliation and banking and navigations. Now let's kind of finalize this thing, right? Because this is all the basic stuff. Reporting. Reporting is awesome. If you do a good job, it's awesome, right? So again, the chart of accounts, garbage in, garbage out mentality, meaning we have a good chart of accounts. We're keeping this up to date. We're reconciling things. Things are balancing nice. Now, reporting is wonderful. So when we get to reports, I'm just going to come over here to reporting. Again, multiple ways to get there. There are other links to get to reporting. And here you can see, you can build custom reports, management related reporting. You can even have things set up. So like for some people we do professional bookkeeping for, we actually have management reports set up so that they will automatically get their reports at the end of every month. And it's fully automatic. So they just get the email and often they'll go, thanks for sending it to me. Well, little do they know, right, that it's just automatically done. We just have to keep up with the work so they're not getting, something that's not accurate. My favorites, right? This shouldn't even be a favorite because I don't even use it. So I unfavored it by hitting the star. But my favorites are going to be my balance sheet, my P&L, right? These are going to be my things that I use the most of. That's a big voice walking out. And so from here, my profit and loss, again, most owners are going to look at that, right? They're going to go, are we making money? We're losing money, right? Balance sheets for accountants, but this is where we're going to go, hey, are my assets actually right? Are my liabilities actually right? Because if this isn't right, 100% this is wrong. So we as accountants, we always start here. And we get this to make sure this looks perfect. And then we know by default, the profitability has to be perfect because that's the law of accounting. Debits must equal the credits. But we do have a ton of other reports down here. I could do a summary balance sheet, detailed balance sheet. This can be very, very long for some people. Profit and loss by class. Boy, this is an interesting one. Let's take a look, right? And so I can see based on the month of September, pretty busy month. Some weird accounting here on my non-specified, but that's just what I do internally with accruals. I can see based on my people, the classification and who's doing what, right? That's why I look at this. So then I can do comparables. I can come in here and I can go, hey, compare it against the previous period and show me the actual change based on the individual and their production level, right? It's kind of lovely, for me to be able to use and kind of do some coaching and things like that. But for most people, they don't need class tracking, right? And you might just come in here and go, give me my P&L, right? And you can look at it by month. You can cut it down and go, hey, show me the last week. I mean, why not? And you can say, okay, over the last week, this is what we've done, right? Well, it doesn't look very good for us in the last week, right? Minus 17,000. But that's the power of the reporting. But this is no good to me unless I'm doing my consistent banking process, and I'm constantly doing it and making sure things are reconciled. My chart of accounts is good and things like that. Okay. Other reports that I think that are important to people, specifically non-accountants, is this guy right here, right? Statement of cash flows. This often does not tell the tale together of where my money went, right? That's what the statement of cash flows does. Statement of cash flows is going to tell me at any given period, right? So if I look at, let's go look at 9/1/23 to today. Sure, let's run it. Okay. Well, for this period of time, this isn't exactly right because I do have some accrual. doing some accruals on there that's tied into my engagements and deferred revenue. But the gist of it is this is going to show you, starting at profitability, where the cash actually went, right? So for this purpose, a bunch of money went out the door for some machinery and equipment, right? Operationally, right, we started here. There was some money that was lent out, paid off some of the Capital One Visa card. Accumulated depreciation is added back because it's non-cash. And then, of course, deferred revenue is added back because it's non-cash. So then truly, that's more of an accurate number for me. And that's why I like to use a statement of cash flows. And then now, where'd the cash go? Right? Well, cash went to equipment, but it was financed. Right? Cash went to pay down some debts, SBA loan, Park State Bank loan, and then a distribution for the remainder amount of cash. So the net cash increase for the period went up 24,000 during that period of time. So that's the power of like, okay, if I'm making money, where does it go? That's the statement of cash flows. That's the, I think, a lovely thing, especially when you get into kind of complex financials. I get a lot of people that ask me, how did I make that kind of money? I don't know where the money went. And often I just look at the statement of cash flows and I can explain it. It's actually a very challenging report to do in accounting school. We had to do them by hand. And it was probably the toughest one to do because of the 3 different categories and having to look at the changes that are affected inside of these reports. But other things, if you do invoicing through here, accounts receivable, aging detail, they're lovely. That's a great one, right? You got to do this. I use this all the time inside clients that do it because we evaluate if it's accurate, right? If I'm going to do invoices in the system, it's got to be accurate. Who you might owe, 1099s, reporting details. If I'm doing it right, again, I got to set my vendors up. Garbage in, garbage out is the theme from that standpoint. Payroll, I rarely use QuickBooks Payroll. It's actually quite expensive, and I don't necessarily like them. From a manipulation standpoint, I've seen some problems. So I don't use this, and it's in the system. They'll keep it there for that. And then some of the stuff that's specific to me. But yeah, it's a way to play around. If you don't like these reports, you can start building them, right? You can have, like, I have a couple ones, right? I've got one for my 2 guys in-house here where I can look at kind of a little bit more detailed stuff for them that I built out. But there's some lovely stuff that you can do inside the reporting. And yeah, kind of right on time, minus my technical snafu. And only other piece, if there's anything else that I want to do. No, that's it. So that's pretty much it for this first round here today. We will potentially be repeating this every couple of weeks for people to jump in. Obviously, different flavor. Kyle will be doing it, not me. And he might go with a different view than I do. I like this one. It's not that big of a deal, but you'll see that from whatever perspective you're in. Again, multiple ways to do the exact same thing. A lot of different buttons. Like, I didn't use any of these, right? Receive payments. Don't do any of that kind of stuff. For me, get to business banking, same thing as this banking here. Again, a lot of different ways to get there. So I am going to now just kind of briefly look to see if there's any questions, if we do have some bonus time. Let's see what we got here. Let's see. Liz, a donor gave some stock to a ministry I support. Would I record that as an asset and I can link to Morgan Stanley like I would with a bank? Oh, yeah. So one of the things, I don't know if you saw it, I don't link mine, but I have a corporate savings account at Schwab. And basically it's to use to pay taxes. It's how I save to do like quarterly estimates and things like that. Again, a lot of people do things differently. That's how I do it, is I use Schwab. I don't actually link mine, right? When I was at my chart of accounts, you could see I had a lot of money over at Schwab, just kind of waiting for the tax man to cometh. Now, could I link Schwab? I think I could, but I get kind of concerned on the ups and downs of a stock, right? So I probably wouldn't link it. I would probably just go, okay, let's start it at what the value of that stock is at the moment that it was given to me, right? Let's say it was 100 grand. Okay, I'm going to say, well, increase my bank account by 100 grand. It would be a bank account in essence. And then I could say, then donation revenue, right? For the other side of that 100 grand. It could literally be a deposit. At the end of the year, there's some tax ramifications of it, but at the end of the year, and depending upon if you sell, then some of that stuff would, come into play. But yeah, I don't think I would. Equity accounts with stock, I don't think I would. I just don't think it's going to, there's really not transactions. It's just the fluctuation of the daily stock market, where this is more all about transactions that actually are hit across the board. I don't think there's any other questions that come in. Seeing there's no questions, if you have any more, feel free to ask away. If you want, feel free to just pop out and you can leave the meeting. I'll wait a few more minutes to see if there's any other questions that come up. Otherwise, I will also allow people to unmute themselves as we come into play here. I think I can do that. Yeah, next meeting, again, it's going to be pretty much every 2 weeks, kind of same time, same channel. We're just going to keep running this bi-weekly indefinitely. We don't have any reason to stop this. I think it's a good value add. We just see more and more people, not doing things as accurate as I think they could, because it's really pretty simple. The biggest thing is just staying on top of it and understanding if I don't stay on top of it, it can cause a little bit more of a headache. If I've got a lot of numbers, like I said here, I've walked into some, there's 300, 400, 500 transactions that need to be classified. That's kind of problematic. I mean, that could be hours and hours and hours, and typically you start to create a lot of rules to speed you up. But yeah, so a couple weeks out, and yeah, what else we got going on here? Will your coming meetings address other questions, or will you start at the beginning each time? We're potentially gonna start just kind of in the basics for this, right? Until we start to realize nobody cares, nobody shows up, right? And then maybe what we'll start to do is get into other categories. Like I know there'll be people that want to invoice. I know there'll be people that want to do accounts payable. As much as I kind of go, oh, it's trouble. It can be done right. It can be done properly. I do see it done right. More often than not, I see it wrong. And that's why I kind of poo-poo it. Again, the concept is crawl before we walk, walk before we run. We get these basics down that we went through of keeping things up to date and keeping things reconciled. I have no problem getting into more advanced topics of things that we see here on our dashboards. We get into all the other fun jazz of doing invoices, sure. So we will do some more advanced kind of training, to understand some of that stuff. But 95% of all of bookkeeping was just done right there. It wasn't that robust, for people. So coolio. All right, folks, thanks for coming. And I'm going to just at least end the recording so we don't tear up my whole hard drive with this thing. But feel free to pop out. I'll stick around, ask any other questions. Thank you.